Hello, I'm Hugh Coakley from the Guildford Dragon News. You may recently have seen at the top of the High Street something that hasn't been in Guildford for the past at least 50 years, a real live pawnbrokers. It's right next to the statue of Guildford's famous son, Archbishop George Abbot, and Prestige Pawnbrokers are opening up their new pawn shop, Posh Pawn, named after the hit Channel 4 series. And we have with us today James Constantinou, the founder and managing director of Prestige Pawnbrokers, and he comes with the reputation of the man who will loan money on anything. James, welcome and thank you for talking to the Guildford Dragon News.
No problem, Hugh. Nice to meet you. You all right?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Yeah, thank you. So,
Good.
but there could be 1,000 places that you could have opened up your new shop. Is it your 5th shop? Why have you chosen Guildford?
Well, I mean, I'm from, I've been living in Surrey for a very long time now, over 40 years, and Guildford has always been sort of close to my heart. It's a great place to shop. There's lots over there. There just seems it's got sort of buzz about it, and it just feels right, really. The high street felt right. You know, you walk up and down the high street. I think it's a perfect fit. It's always obviously a bit of a gamble when you're opening a new store, and I'm not really one for doing, there's companies out there that do all the demographics and all that sort of business. I just tend to walk up and down the high street a few times, and if I get a feel for it, then I sort of go on my gut, really, to be quite honest with you. Might be good, might not be, but so far I haven't done too bad.
So why do you think there'll be demand for a pawnbrokers in Guildford?
Well, Guildford, it's a fairly wealthy town in the middle of Surrey. It's a very wealthy county. I just think, it's not far from London. It's got really everything going for it in terms of the assets. So I know, because I'm fairly local, I know the areas that surround Guildford. You've got Godalming there. So there's a lot of good areas surrounding. I think it's sort of a hub, if you like. It'll attract the right people there. And I do believe there's people with the assets there that have probably had money for a while and sort of gathered assets together over years, and that's the sort of client that we look for, really, to be honest with you. People that have had money for a while, that have collected art, wine, cars, or what have you. And I think going into what we're about to go into in terms of the devastation caused economically by the pandemic, I think it's going to be very difficult times, certainly for the next couple of years, probably a lot longer, but immediately a couple of years. And I just think it will work there because the clients, they're my type of clients.
Well, what is your typical client? What's the sort of client you're expecting to come into the Guildford shop?
Well, I mean, look, we don't. I say they're my typical clients. It's not really. It's very difficult to say I've got a typical client, but usually, I mean, because we will do business with almost anyone with any level if they've got something to bring in, whether it's a £50 piece of gold or whether it's a £500,000 piece of art. So we sort of got quite a broad spectrum in terms of our client base, but I think that there are a lot of people local to that store that will have assets and have collected assets for whether it's jewellery, art, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, they'll be there. So they'll be the sort of people that we'll be hoping that will come in, might want to do a deal. They don't have to. It doesn't have to be at that level. It can be someone with a Rolex watch, or wants to borrow £1,000 or 500 quid. That's absolutely fine, and I welcome those people as well, because they're what keeps all the cogs oiled and the business sort of moving, if you like. I think that there are just more of those high-end assets locally to Guildford than there might be in other locations across the UK. So, my brand might not work as well in other cities or towns up and down the country, but I've got a good feeling about it, knowing the area in the way that I do. I mean, I'm from Weybridge. It's sort of probably similar in its terms of demographics, although it's not probably got the footfall at the weekend that a town like Guildford has got, where it's busy. I think they're open on a Sunday down there now as well, aren't they? They're trading on a Sunday. So I was there during the pandemic. It wasn't at a time of lockdown, and it was busy there. And it was a Sunday afternoon. I think I went over there. We took the kids and got some food in the high street, and it was just good to see, quite buzzy still, even during these difficult times. So I think I've just got a good feeling about it. Yeah, I'm of the opinion that the clients that we're looking to seek and the bigger deals that we're looking to do are going to be local to that store.
Guildford is said to be the most second resilient high street behind Cambridge at the moment. So
Is it?
Well, that's what we're told. That's what we're told.
Well, I should have gone to Cambridge then, shouldn't I?
You should have gone to Cambridge, possibly. So
Well,
it's interesting to note, James, that you've chosen such a prominent place in the high street. I mean,
well, that was an accident, to be quite honest with you. That was a bit of an accident. I mean, I love the high street, and I love the cobbled, the feel of it. It looks great when you're up the top there. It was just luck that store, that particular building came up for grabs. It came through the auction route. And when I saw it, I just thought, God, if I can get that at a reasonable price, it'd be fantastic for the brand. And it is. I mean, you couldn't get a better location, I don't think, in the town.
Is it a freehold?
It's a freehold, yeah. I just don't believe for us, I think it's great because it's very visual. So it's a beautiful stone building, on 4 floors. It's just great. It's great for us. So
what strikes me, call me old-fashioned, but if I was short of money and looking to, short of cash flow and looking to borrow some money, I wouldn't necessarily want other people to know, that I was going into posh porn with my Lamborghini or my Rolex watch. I mean, how discreet can such a high street shop be?
Well, I mean, don't forget, it's not just a pawn shop. Obviously, it's got the name Posh Porn, but predominantly that shop will be retail, to be quite honest with you. We've set it up for retail. So you won't see it now, but when it's unveiled in about a month or 5-6 weeks' time, when we're ready to launch, hopefully, God willing, if the lockdown eases, then you'll see that store is geared up for retail. So it's pretty spectacular. I won't give too much away. People should come down and have a look, but it's unlike anything we've ever done before. So in terms of how it's been laid out, you'll go in and you'll be wowed by what you'll see in there. It's pretty spectacular. And I think it's as I said, we're going to be retailing watches, jewelry, handbags. We're going to have motorbikes in there. We're going to have all sorts of stuff. Now we're even going to get an F1 car in there. In the middle of the store. It's a big space, so it needs filling, and we've got some interested items to advertise and move on. So for us, that store has become more of a showpiece about what we do, to be quite honest with you. Unlike any other store that I've got, we've got 10 stores now, so that store will be the one that we will be sort of showcasing, if you like, in terms of any promotion. It's spectacular inside. I don't want to give too much away. It's quite exciting though. But if anyone walks past, they're going to see exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, you've given a fair bit away there. I'm looking forward to seeing this F1 car. I'm looking forward to know who on earth would be buying an F1 car. I mean, who's flogged you an F1 car?
Well, it's going to be we've geared it up so that you can. There's quite a lot going on inside, and we've been offered this car as a sort of on loan for about a year or 18 months, and we're thinking of getting it in the middle of the store because it's such a vast space. But there's going to be old motorbikes in there. There's old Indian motorcycles. There's all sorts of stuff. It's going to be all very tasteful, high end. There's luxury handbags, Hermes, Chanel. We're going to be retailing all that. So really, when you walk past, it's going to look like a very exclusive, high-end, pre-owned asset shop, where you can go and buy these items. But in the back, if you want to go through another little door, you can go out the back and go and talk to an advisor and talk about borrowing money. If you've got anything like what we've got at the front that's for sale, then you can come in the back, and if it's your car or your watch or your jewelry or your art or your wine or anything else that you want to bring into us, we'll look at almost anything of value. We'll try and facilitate a loan. And as you know, if you've seen the show, that we are probably quicker than anyone else in the country if you need to get your hands on some money. I don't believe there's anyone else that can do it quicker than we can.
Okay, so so there's going to be things like motorbikes, and
Yeah, we've got a couple of bikes at the moment we're disposing of. They're very high end. They're limited in their numbers. They're old Indian motorcycles from the 40s, and we're going to put them in there. We're advertising them, so just to make it a bit more interesting.
So what sort of percentage of the goods that people pawn, like motorcycles, what sort of percentage of these things are reclaimed by their owner?
Well, to be honest with you, it's a very high percentage. So you're not going to, when you're looking into when you come in and see my store and you're looking around, hardly any of that stock is people's belongings, because only roughly 18% of the business we do on the loans is unredeemed. And when I say unredeemed, I mean uncollected. So 82% of what we do, people pay back, get their items back, and they may come back to do more business with us in the future. So when you're looking at our store and you're looking at all the items, they're not necessarily things that people haven't collected. Most of those items will be things that we've bought in, because what people maybe don't know, that haven't seen the TV show, is that we buy and sell and the same items that we loan against. And I think we are well known in that arena of being very strong buyers for all the brands of watches, Rolex, all of them basically, and all the jewelry, Cartier, Bulgari, any item of jewelry that anyone wants to dispose of and just sell. Don't traipse into London, or you can do. We've got a store in Hatton Garden if you want to go up there. But if you're local to Guildford, bring it down there, because you're not going to get any more for it by going into town. In fact, we pride ourselves on paying more than anyone else that we know of, to be quite honest with you, for certain items. If they're in good condition and we're able to retail them, because of the reputation we've gained through the TV show, we like to think that we're in a strong buying position as well, because we've got the clients.
Okay.
And to be honest with you, with what's going on economically, it's very difficult. We're in a very fortunate position because of the long-running Channel 4 show that we are trading. We've got an strong online presence, so you can pawn something online if you need to, but really our retail arm, which is mainly online, is very strong. So and that's really got so much traction because of it's gaining traction because of the TV show.
Yeah. Someone said to me that it's going to be fun to have Posh Porn in the high street, and your description there, it does make it sound like it's going to be an interesting shop, but there's also a serious side, isn't there? I mean, when you are charging, when you do pawn something, you charge, I think, over 80% on, it says on your website, for the loan. And people go to pawnbrokers when they need money quickly, and presumably, if they need a fair deal of money very quickly, there's a certain amount of desperation and possibly misery involved. I mean,
well, I think
and financial failure. How do you feel about that side of pawnbroking?
Well, I don't really agree with that. That 80%, the 80% APR that you're reading is a little bit of a red herring, because it's a regulatory requirement for us to advertise our yearly rate, but our contracts aren't for a year; they're only 7 months. It's a little bit like every taxi driving around saying, "I'm going to charge you 100 quid for this ride," because they've got to advertise a journey that takes an hour or something when their journeys are only 5 minutes. It's a red herring to.
But if you borrow 25, I think your website says if you borrow 25,000 for 7 months, it's going to cost you 37.5 or something like that. So it's not it's a lot of money, and people wouldn't do that unless they really had to. Or am I reading it wrong?
Well, to be honest with you, I mean, look, I'll give you an example of a man who come to see me, and he borrowed a couple of 100,000 off me. And he borrowed it at a rate of 2.9%. Okay. 2.9%. He borrowed 200,000. He paid it back in a month, and it cost him 205,800. Now, I know for a fact that you cannot borrow that money anywhere else in this country cheaper than that. But we don't talk, they don't, with the headline isn't that, it's the APR, which is irrelevant because we don't do loans for a year. But if you told me that you could go into a bank and borrow 200,000 for 5,800, I'd say you were lying, because I know you can't. And it's cheaper than a bank for less than 3 months. Now, bearing in mind, our loans are for 7 months. But so if you go into 4th and 5th and 6th months, it's more expensive than a bank. But when you take out all the fees that an institution like one of the big four, or even let's forget all the others that will charge you more money. I mean, the big four are heavily regulated, and they'll toe the line to a degree. But what I'm saying is, if you wanted to borrow 200,000 from one of the big four, or even any of the banks in the high street, you wouldn't get it you wouldn't get it for 200 grand for a month for 5,800. You'd pay that alone in setup fees. Then there'd be an early redemption fee. Then you'd have to take out an insurance policy. Then you'd have to wait 2 months for people to sit around a table and discuss it and make sure that all the boxes are ticked. And if you do tick all the boxes, which you're very unlikely to be quite honest with you, in this market, but let's just say you do, then you'll probably have to wait 3 to 4 months before you get your money in the bank. So I don't really agree that it's an expensive way of borrowing. I think it's a very cheap way of borrowing short term. In the same way, if you were going up to Scotland, you wouldn't drive there, you wouldn't get an Uber, would you? You get on the train. You're not going to borrow money from me for 12 months, 2 years, 3 years. It doesn't work. And I openly promote the fact that it doesn't work. I don't want anyone to go into a loan with me thinking that they can't pay back within a few months, because I don't recommend it. But if you're looking for short-term funding, don't bother going up the high street if you've got assets. Come and see us. It's be far cheaper for you. If you can pay back that loan within 3 months, it is a far cheaper way of borrowing money than going to any other lender in the country that I know of. And can't be, you'll get people phoning in there saying, well, I've seen so-and-so online promoting that they do 4.9 per year. Yeah, I'm sure you will, but they won't do you a loan for a month or two. And then there's all the other fees that I've talked about. That's the problem with it. And the fees that they're not openly displaying at the beginning. Our fees are a flat rate. There are no other fees. We don't charge for appraising anything. We don't charge for storing anything. We don't charge for insurance. There's lots of other fees that all the other lenders bolt on, which hikes the rate up far more than 2.9% on 100 grand or 200 grand. But you don't see those fees. So all I'm saying is, don't let the rate scare you away in respect to borrowing, because that's just a little bit of a red herring, to be quite honest with you.
I think, James, I think that Posh Porn has changed people's views of pawnbrokers, I think. I mean, it's always been, there's a traditional view, and then there's the James Constantinou prestige pawn. Are you going to have a traditional bar with 3 balls underneath it, like a traditional pawnbrokers?
Well, I have had. I mean, my first store has got the. Actually, I don't think they've got. We moved from. I have had those 3 balls, and the 3 balls are great. To be quite honest with you, it's more of the older generation, probably like us. To be quite honest with you,
certainly like me.
Well, me as well, but the pawnbroking, is 3 balls. But the youngsters, when I say youngsters, I'm talking about anyone pre-40, to be quite honest with you. But they're not really. They probably don't pay too much attention to the 3 balls. Probably don't even know what they mean, to be honest with you. But I thought, when I first thought of pawnbroking 11 years ago, I too thought it was very archaic, and I thought the approach by the big players in the business was very stagnated. And I was looking at the whole industry and thought, God, this is, they've got quite an interesting way of lending here. They've got a great opportunity to bust this open into something far bigger than it is, and it's not very exciting, and it looks a bit boring, and they don't like risk. I mean, I'm not saying that risk is wise, but they were very, very safe in terms of what they were doing. And that's not really what I do. I like a little bit of an edge on the deals that I do. And I with pawnbroking, I was buying and selling almost anything anyway. So it was a natural fit for me. I know, and I was given a license to do it. So sort of went with my personality, and it's paid off. And I think that's what attracted the TV, Channel 4 to make the series out of it. I mean, we had a lot of press prior to that because there was no one else in the country doing what we were doing. We had the BBC World News down there do a feature on us. We were in the papers every other week. So we were causing a bit of a stir before the TV got hold of it. But I think that we have certainly dragged it forward. And at first, people in the industry didn't really like what we were doing. They were like, who is this fellow? He's come along. He's getting a bit of limelight here. He's, they don't like it. And I can understand that. And, I probably wasn't that welcome in the industry. But I think it turned round. It took a couple of years, but people were coming up to me at the conferences and saying, oh, by the way, I'm just letting you know that our stores are never been busier, and people coming in asking us if we do a lot of the assets that you're doing, and we've started looking at those now. We're doing handbags, we're looking at cars and other things. And I'm thinking, well, that's great. I don't mind. It's fantastic that, and they've said, yeah, it's to do with the show, because the show went out and it changed everyone's perception. Like you said, people didn't think of it as a dirty word anymore, because like I've just explained, you can go to one of the high street banks and sit there and have someone who doesn't really know too much about your situation or lending money, tick a load of boxes, send it off for a month or two, and then some other people can talk about it for a few weeks. But with me, you can come in and see me, or see one of my guys that are, well versed in what we do, and you can get an answer that day. You can get an answer within 10 minutes if you bring the right items to us. So I just think it's an exciting way of borrowing money, and it's nothing dirty about it. Why would you go to a bank, jump through hoops, bend over backwards, sit by the phone for 2 months waiting for a call, pay more money than you would to me, when you can just come in, leave something with me of value, have the money discreetly put in your bank account with no adverse credit? That won't be, if you're having a credit search or the credit rating, it doesn't affect you. When you go to a bank, that's registered. You've got credit there. You've got to declare that credit. It can be scrutinised. It can affect any further borrowing. You don't have that when you come to us. I think it's a fantastic way of borrowing cash.
James,
As I said, it's cheap.
James, you sell your business very well. Now, I hope you keep the Guildford Dragon News posted. We're very interested in your new shop, and thank you very much for talking to the Guildford Dragon News.
Cheers, Hugh. Thank you.